Thank you for joining me back. I'm back in the store, so I have my mask on. We don't have all the windows open and I kind of like everything flowing through well. I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a very fun day and I hope you've enjoyed all of our demos. Today, this last one is going to be on binding. And this morning I did show you how to do a bias binding. And if there's any questions for somebody that might have missed that one, we can go back and I can discuss it. I won't be able to cut it here today, but I can discuss it with you. The reasoning for using a bias binding is that it does have a little more stretch in it, and the weaves are cross-weaved across when you're wrapping that around the edge of your binding, less likely to have 4 or 5 of them break than if you are on this, this is a diagonal cross, than if you are on a straightened down and cutting it into strips. Bindings are usually the first thing that goes on a quilt that need to be replaced, and they're easy to replace. You just take them off and do another binding. But it depends on how you're using it, on whether, if you want to use the diagonal, the cross, the bias, I would recommend those more for heavy use ones such as baby blankets. And the straight edge are great for decorative and things that maybe won't be washed as much or dragged around. I know that just gave everybody shivers just thinking of having a quilt dragging, but it happens. Before I get started, I want to talk about the right tools. Having the right tools makes a huge difference in your ability to accomplish what you're after. We can get by, but by getting by, you're either going to be working harder or you're going to have to fudge on how things turn out here and there more often. So one of my favorites, the 8.5 inch by 24.5 inch creative grid ruler. It has the non-slip on the back for it. I like the width of it. It's stabilized. It's more stable when you're cutting large strips. This here I would use when I was cutting a bias for the first cut. And I'll go over that in just a moment with you. I'm going to give you a demo without a true demo on that one. The cutting mat, I buried it, so we're going to have to wait on that. Okay, thank you, Paula. So the cutting mats, you're going to want a large, I got 2 cutting mats. I'm grabbing it funny here. You're going to want a large cutting mat. If you're going to be cutting on a bias, you can get by without one, a large cutting mat. If you're doing straight cutting, so you'd want at least a 24 inch width somewhere on that cutting mat. So this is the creative grid, and it has 2 different sides, which makes it very nice. This one here has a 1/2 inch by 1 inch increments, and this is the 1 inch increments. And I know it's in plastic. You'll get a closer look at it in a minute. I have one out of plastic. You can see. You know what they're cutting mats, you're extra careful to keep them out of the sun and not drop them like that. Sorry. The large Stripology ruler. This is the extra large. And if you're cutting strips of any kind, whether it is a binding strip or not, this would be a huge improvement on cutting your time down. That didn't make sense. That was backwards. But anyway, I think you got what I was trying to say with that. It has the slits in it, and it also has the directions for if you need to do 1/4 inch cuts instead of 1/2 inch, because these increments are 1/2 inch splits. But you can adjust it to where you can get it, and it goes fast with that also. The 2.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. This one I use when I go to put my binding pieces together. I'll be showing this one shortly. I have lots of these all over the house. Best ruler. We're going to be working with some diagonal seam tape. Little tape right here. I'm going to show you more of that later. You want to start off with a good rotary cutter, one that fits comfortable in your hand. And there's different types. We have 2 different ones in the store, so we would be happy to let you try them out before you purchase it. But make sure you find one that you're comfortable with, because everybody has different ways that they hold their hands. And then we also have, you want to make sure you have a good rotary blade. If you haven't changed your blade lately and don't remember when, probably try and change your blade. That cuts down on cutting your fingers. I like to use I hardly ever use pens, but I'm going to be using the crystal glass head pens today. And I really like these, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. And also the Wonder Clips. And this is going to be used at the end of our binding process. And I start with my binding needles, and I use the quilting needles, and I start with the 7511, and then I use the 9014 when I'm finishing off the binding after I fold it, and I'll discuss that in a moment also. So as we're getting started, I'm going to go over the cutting on the bias real quick also, back to that. So here, we're going to split screen. Oh, no, we're not just, oh, no, I'm going to move the screen. Never mind, sorry. Okay, so do you see the lines here on this mat? These are the 45-degree angles. And if you were going to cut a bias, you would lay your fabric on it, and it would be open and ready. And then you would just match up. And I'm doing this in a very tight, from one corner to the other corner. Then after you cut it, then you can fold the cut edge. Then you can fold the cut edge in half. That would have been the cut edge there. But today I'm not going to do that one, or this afternoon I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this straight, and I do have to run and grab a ruler. I forgot. The square one, the square Stripology one, please. So right now what I'm doing is I'm lining up. Yes, please. Thank you, Paula. So I took and I lined up my fabric, got it even. There's a fold right here. This is your salvage edge. And then I'm going to line that salvage edge up nicely with the fold. It doesn't have to be right on the fold, but you have to make sure you have it straight. And you also want it to be straight down here. And I make my strips at 2.5. There's different sizes that people prefer. 2 1/4 is very popular. And again, if you're using the Stripology rulers, there are directions in it to cut it at 2 1/4. And I would use the larger ruler today, but I don't have enough space for it right now in here. So I'm lining up right here on this line, and I'm getting it to close to the edge as I can. You need a trimmer? I have one. No, I have one. I just don't know what I did with it. I'm looking for my rotary blade. Excuse me for a minute. Oh, yeah, thank you. It's a good thing Paula's here. She found me, or it would have bitten me. So I'm going to start right here on the 0. And when you're doing this, when you're using your Stripology rulers, love them. But you have to remember one thing. And if you come in and buy it from us, I will make sure that you know how to do this before you leave. The teardrop right here, you want to let that blade just rest. Not that much. Just let it rest. Then when you have it in the groove, then you press down and you cut on through to the other teardrop. Rest, cut, rest, cut, rest, cut. Okay, and then the last one's going to be my 12.5 here. Now, when I need to come back in and restart, oops, that one got cut. I can just put this fabric here. And you see how this has a little bit where the grooves are there. Well, I just go to the 0 one, And I line it right up there, and I'm pushing down a little bit here so that it's catching on its groove. And it just slides right back in, and I can just get going again. Rest, cut, rest, cut. And now you have your strips ready to put on your binding. Nope, you have your strips ready to put on your quilt. So I'm going to walk you through all the steps over here on the sew machine. So Paula's going to switch me over to this side. Again, I have, now I don't normally sew this part together with a walking foot on. Oh, I hit join audio. Should I have? No. No audio. I got it. Okay. Okay. There we go. Yes. Okay. So I've got my strips.
I'm just gonna move this closer because this is your audio.
Yep. Thank you. So when you're joining your blocks together, I always put like this will be your bottom one. Notice that I have my edge over here. And this is my top. And I always, because I have this salvage still on this one also, I always let them go ahead and hang over a little bit more. It makes it much easier to do this. But now you're wondering how I'm going to get a straight line there without chalking it. I'm going to use the seam tape. It comes in a strip like this, so you can mark your straight and your 1/4 inch seam. So the table on here actually has something I can line up to, but it stops right here, and I need it to go all the way up there. So I'm going to drop it on here. Now I'm going to follow this red line right here as I'm stitching. I'm going to start it at the, whoops. Sorry, I got to adjust my stitch length. I'm going to adjust it down because I'm using a walking foot right now. And when I do the seams of sewing my strips together, I do go to about 2.1. And I'm going to put this right where the needle's going to come down and start at, up here. And then down here, I'm going to make sure that my joining part is right here on the red. I'm just going to stitch. I do not back stitch this because I am going to catch this later when I quilt it onto my quilt. And that's how I join my seams together. You take, if you're new to binding, you take your seam, make sure, and you know what? I did it the wrong direction. Do you believe that? Let me do this one more time for you. That was great.
This is live video.
Live. Okay.
It's good to show them what not to do.
Yeah, don't do that, okay? So let's do it this way. Now the point that's joined, notice my tails are over to the left. I should have caught that. Again, this way you guys can see it again. I'm going to line this up right here where the needle goes. I'm going to come down and I'm going to make sure that the joining part is right here on the red. Hello? Ta-da. That's what I wanted to see. Okay, now I'm going to take it over to the cutting table and I'm going to just cut that off real quick. And that's one of the times that I'm starting to use my 2.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. It does. I don't need that one on.
Oh, it's on.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Wow, I'm not used to having so much assistance. And actually, it's good that Paula came over and did that for me because I'm going to cut it here. And then I'm going to cut my tags, my ear tags off too. Dog ears off. Then after I cut the dog ears off, I take it over to the ironing board and I press the seam open. So I do a finger press. And if I was at the ironing board, I would turn it over and I would iron from the top side and I open them flat. I iron them flat. Now I used to always fold my binding in half and press it. And I started reading up and then I started practicing it. And I no longer iron my seam right here flat. And it makes a big difference because when you're rolling it over, you're not at the true half seam by the time it rolls over a seam and rolls over the additional fabrics. So when I'm joining it to my quilt, okay, Paula's even faster than we are actually, because we're not ready to see it yet anyway. Thank you.
No, it's
No, I'm not. Just one moment. Okay, we're on. So I fold it up like this, and I want to leave enough to come back and gather it together. I'm working on a small project right now. I'm going to show you how to join your ends of your binding together on a little bit larger piece. But I'm leaving a tail over here. It's allowing me enough space to come back and catch it. And actually I left too much. So I'm going to pull it back over here. Okay. I'm going to, now I use a walking foot at this point. I highly recommend you use a walking foot. I have dual feet also, and I prefer the walking foot for this part. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to do, because I did a 2.5 inch, I'm going to do a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to follow the spot on my walking foot. And if you don't have a spot on your walking foot, you can use a pad, a sticky pad right here, and guide it, or you can go back and use the tape again and follow the 1/4 inch line on there for your fabric. So I'm going to stitch. Notice I put my finger down here at the end of this, and you're getting close to, and I'm going to back stitch up here because I'm getting started. So as you're getting close to the end, whatever size stitch you're doing, like this is a 2, whoops, I need to lengthen my stitch length. Or this is a 1/4 inch seam here. I'm going to stop the walking foot before that, but I'm going to do a little backward stitching before I even get to that point. And then, oh, I went over. My vision is a little off here. I apologize. So this is what happens when your vision is off. That's why you did that extra little stitch there without it being a back stitch, because you can just come in and take it back off. And you're right where you need to be. I'm going to get rid of the string so you guys aren't looking at it. So when you, so I finished right here. I am folding this all over, and so I just manually fold it as I go along. And you want to fold it back to where you get your 9 or your 45-degree angle right here, and you want this angle to be straight. So you want it to be straight here, here, and you want it to line up with the edge of your quilt and the edge of the rest of your binding over here. So I do that, and then I just fold it over. Hold my fingers here. You can use pans. I prefer not to use pans. And you want to make sure now that you don't lose that 90-degree angle you have underneath there, but you want this edge to be even right here with your quilt. This time you're going to go and you're going to reverse stitch it too, down. Going back, touching it, and then I'm going to come down. You can also use the flips at this point if you'd like to. If you learn to do it without all that and you're happy with your results, you won't have to, you'll save time. But if you're not, you need to, you use pins. Whatever makes it comfortable and enjoyable for you. Make sure this is lined up. Again, as I come into the corner, back stitch, and then I'm going to come on. I think I did better that time. And you're going to work it all the way around your quilt. Again, you're doing the 45 straight, even at the top, back over. You can continue on with your quilt. I'm going to just get this started, and then I'm going to show you how to join your ends together when you come to your end. So I did the reverse again, and then I would continue stitching down. So on this one here, I quilted this front to the front of the quilt. And when you do that, you want to roll it over to the back. And this is for people that want to do the hand quilting. Then you would hand quilt this with the blind stitch back here. I do it with the machine. So usually I stitch from the back side, and then when I roll it over, it'll be on the front, and I'll show you more about that in a moment. So now I'm to the point where I have my 2 ends. Now this is probably the trickiest part of the whole quilt. So I'm going to take you over here to this camera. Show you how I do this. Okay, thank you, right there, that's good. Okay, so I use because I did a 2.5 inch width. I see where I started and stopped here. I'm gonna lay this ruler up here. Oh, careful, on the edge there. And I'm gonna lay the first one over. This is where, so I've got it in the center because I'm going to overlap them 2.5 inches. You overlap the same amount as the width of your binding. So I'm overlapping it by 2.5. You could chalk mark it. I'm using my finger now as my marker. And I'm going to trim this straight. There we go. Not to the hard part yet. Once this part's over, then you get to just go back and flip it. So I lay that down. I lay my ruler on top of it. And then I'm going to go over this side. Lay it over. Put my fingernail down. There. Off. Now I'm going to join these two together, and this is where I use pins. So you want to leave enough space between your pins to get your walking foot through, or you can take your walking foot off and put your other foot back on. I tend to just run it with the walking foot at this point. Putting my points together on my top point up here. And you're going to ask, how do I know? So if you want to test it before you do too much work here, just stick a pin in there And you can see when it folds back over, it's going to catch itself. It's very easy to get these twisted around. You do have to pull them in. And I like these pins because they're extra long. So I go in and I catch it twice because I don't want it to twist. It's going to twist some just because of the way you're gathering it together and you have this bunchy thing going here, but you're trying to help it along. See, I flattened it out to catch my other end, and I go in twice. Now you could use a chalk pencil if you want to and draw your line across here from this point to this point, because that's where you're going to stitch at. But I'm going to come back and use the tape. It's okay. I'm putting the tape on while Paula is binding me on the screen. So when you're working with a big bulky quilt right now, it's really nice if you can have more space over to your left to lay everything on. But thankfully, these are just little hot pads here. Yes, I'm kind of laying it down. Now, this one here, I don't have them crossing over at the top, right? So I know I'm going to start up here at the top, and I just leave a little bit of a peak right here sticking out at the bottom. And yes, I have a hands-free, so I actually have 3 hands going here right now at once. It does make it a lot easier. In case you're wondering what I keep doing and how the foot just automatically rises up because I asked it to. So again, I'm down here on the point and I'm getting ready to start up here on the point. Oops, I need to drop my stitch link down so I got a walking foot on. And I'm just going to stitch on over. As I get closer, I'm letting that lay back down because notice I had a little bit gathered up there under that. I'm going to go back over to the screen in a second.
Okay. This is your audio. I'm trying to.
Oh, okay. I'm not talking about it.
It's not you.
Okay, so I take the pins back out. Now, before I do anything, I am going to really double check and make sure that it laid down. And it did. I'm just going to go over and instead of having Paula go over to the other side, I can do it right here. I do this at home. I was going to try to do it the proper way of doing it. But this is what I really do at home. I take my scissors and I cut me a 1/4 inch off over here. And I just open that seam up with fingers and finger press it. And I don't iron this one. I just finger press it open, put my finger in the middle, kind of help it fold over in place. And look at that. And then you just,
Wow. I say wow.
Yes, you can say
But
that.
they're saying it at home. They just can't hear it.
Okay. So then I'm going to come back over here. Now I find this is there are so many rulers out there on how to do the binding with the joining point of it here, and just by using the same size overlap of the 2 fabrics, and then sewing them together on the diagonal is much easier to me than any of the tools I've ever seen. Got off track here, sorry guys. I'll have to okay, I have to apologize. I did get off track there. So I'll fix that later. But the next part. So remember I said earlier, because the first one I did with the binding on the front. I joined it on the front. If you're going to hand stitch it down, put your binding on the front. But if you want to pull your binding over to the front and machine stitch it, put your binding on the back. So I pull it over, and I'm going to stitch it. And when you come to your corners, this side here is holding the bulk of it. So I want the bulk of the front to be on the left side. So I use my Wonder Clips. I love these Wonder Clips. The best thing for binding. So I flatten that back down. There's a little bit of lumpiness in there because I'm pulling it around. You can just put your thumb in there and push it, or you can use the stiletto, purple thing. And then you fold the other side over. Get it? And now's the time that you want to balance that out. There we go. I'm going to put a clip in and then I'll show you that I got it. So I like these clips because you can just put them on the ends there. And you see I got my point there lined up. I'm going to stick a couple of clips in here. And then I'm going to do this one right here again. I'm going to push it down with my thumb again. Smooth it out. So here's where you want your 90 degree to come back out on the outside. Over. And I am readjusting it because I noticed that they weren't wanting to come together there. There we go. Came together. Now I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not worried about what the back side looks like because it's going to be a nice straight stitch. And if I'm matching my thread to my backing or the top stitch of my quilting, it's going to be, and it's going to have the appearance that it's just part of the quilting then. If I truly wanted to match it and hit into the groove area on the back, I probably would do a 2 3/8 binding. But binding is not my thing. Here I am doing a demo on binding. It's not my thing. So when I'm making bed quilts, and I know they're going to get washed a lot, I just like to have the top binding. That's one more extra layer of protection before it comes in, because you're using 2 threads that's joined together instead of just one. So I won't be replacing binding for people that I've given them to right away. Okay, so now I am lining up just about a 1/16 from my center point here to the edge of my foot there. I'm just stitching it down. I should have had a purple thing over here to hold this guy down in place, but
Yeah.
see how it's trying to pull back? That's where I'd be using my purple thing right now. And you want to crank just one over. You clip there with your needle down, spin, and you're ready to go again. Just go slow.
This one? Yes. Yeah. It's very. Yeah.
And you get a nice straight, even stitch all the way around.
Yes. You can go first.
Paula has. It'll be just a moment. Sorry, can you switch it back to where I can answer questions, please? Sorry, ladies. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or what? Oh, yes. I guess we could do it up here. Yes.